The Pentagon is running NATO. It's belief, and I'm very sorry to say this, that Muslims are terrorists. The Americans were involved in coup d'etats earlier in Turkey. We have to understand that NATO is a group of 28 countries today. So it's the United States, it's Turkey, it's Great Britain, it's Germany, it's France, it's many other countries. But these 28 countries, they are not all, let's say, on the same power level. One country is more powerful than others, and this is the United States. Nixon, former US president, once said, NATO is the only international organization which works, and this is because it's a military organization and it's because the US is in charge. And I think that's true in the sense that the Pentagon is running NATO. It's always an American general who is heading the military branch of NATO as Supreme Allied Commander Europe, the SOCR. So really, everybody who is in NATO has to follow the orders of the Pentagon. When we look at Gladio, the secret army, then we also see that, first of all, most people don't even know that Gladio existed, and that most people don't know that the Pentagon is carrying out secret warfare. Maybe just to explain to people who don't know what Gladio means, Gladio is the name for a secret army that was discovered in Italy in the year 1990. So that's, you know, a long time ago. It's 27 years ago. At that time, the Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti was forced to admit that they had a secret army in the Italian state. And at the same time, also in Turkey, the authorities had to admit that there was a secret army in Turkey called counter-guerrilla. And also in Germany, they had to admit there is a secret army called Stay Behind. And also in Switzerland, they had to admit there was a C-26, and also in Denmark and in France and in Norway. So actually in many, many countries of Western Europe, in the year 1990, secret armies were discovered. So this was a huge military scandal. The British press, The Guardian and The Independent said this is the biggest military secret. But then people were not watching because at that time Saddam Hussein of Iraq was invading Kuwait just at the same time in August 1990. So people did not look at Gladio. They looked to Kuwait and Iraq and everything there. And I've written a book about Operation Gladio, and in that book I show that NATO had the coordinating function for Gladio, and that Gladio had been set up as a sort of anti-communist network. They trained to become active in case of a Soviet invasion of Western Europe, or to influence politics in different countries through coup d'etats or false flag terrorism. When the secret armies were discovered, and it was also discovered that the CIA, the American Secret Service, and the MI6, the British Secret Service, had set up these secret armies, and that in every country the Secret Service was actually directing these secret armies. I mean, obviously you have different secret services in different countries, but it's usually within the Defense Ministry that you have the military Secret Service. And there, this Secret Service would cooperate with the CIA and the MI6 to run the secret armies. In Turkey, it was the MIT, the MIT. This Secret Service was cooperating with the CIA, and they were coordinating the secret armies in Turkey. And so everybody was saying, oh, yes, there is this secret army. We will just close it down. You know, the Cold War has ended, the Berlin Wall has fallen, the Soviet Union is about to collapse. We will close it down. We don't need the secret armies anymore. It's over. But this is very difficult because, first of all, parliaments didn't know anything about the secret armies. And if you look at the rules of a democracy, then parliamentarians should always be informed what happens in the defense department. So parliamentarians should know how much money goes to the military, how much tanks there are, how many soldiers, how many generals, and if the army is active in other countries, the parliament should know. So the rule is, for every democracy, on every country in the world, that the parliamentarians must know. And if there is a secret army and the parliamentarians don't know anything about it, and it's just the defense department and the prime minister and the president who decide, so just the executive branch, then this really is a misfunctioning of democracy. And that's what we call the so-called deep state. So a level of government which is not controlled by parliamentarians, first of all. Secondly, which the press knows nothing about. So you, as a journalist, you would know nothing about it. And third, scientists, historians, so me, were not informed either. I mean, you know, they certainly closed down Gladio, but they opened something new. That's how you usually do it. They didn't stop secret warfare. The whole story is, do we still have secret warfare? And yes, we do have secret warfare today. That's very obvious. Especially if we look at Turkey, it is a very special country for NATO because on the one side, I have said that NATO is being controlled from Washington, from the United States. So you can see the United States has military bases in Turkey, like Incirlik. But if you look, Turkey has no military bases in the United States, okay? Or if you look, the United States has military bases in Germany, Ramstein, for instance. But Germany has no military bases in the United States. So this basically means the US is the empire. They're the most powerful country. And they will always look that people who have very high-ranking positions in NATO, that they are friendly to the Pentagon. Okay, they will always try to have, you know, people in Turkey in the military. They will bring them to United States, so they make friends with American generals or people, high-ranking people in the Turkish Secret Service meet. They will bring them to United States and have lunch together and you know, go skiing together or just do things together, so that a level of trust is established. And this is just the way that they try to control NATO through networks. And if somebody is being thrown out from the command structure within NATO, the United States will always try to replace them with somebody whom they are in good contact. But you would have to look at specific names in Turkey, and you would have to look at generals and see, did they travel to the United States? How long were they there? Do they serve the Turkish interests or do they serve the American interests? Because, you know, sometimes the interests of Turkey and the US are the same. You know, for instance, when it came to the war in Syria, both Washington and Ankara wanted to overthrow the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad, which is illegal. You can't do it. It's illegal. But then the Americans said, let's support the Kurds. And the Turks said, no, we don't want that. So in this case, the interests, you know, went in different ways. So it's very interesting to look at moments when it goes in different ways and at moments when it goes in the same way. Pentagon is running NATO. It's belief, and I'm very sorry to say this, that Muslims are terrorists. The Americans were involved in coup d'etats earlier in Turkey.
This is a very important question for the Turkish people and Turkish television channels also. Do you think the NATO secret armies has an secret role, I mean, take an action for the 15 July coup attempt in Turkey in 16?
Yeah, it is a very, very important question. I agree. It could be. It's possible. And if indeed, you know, American interests were involved, or if indeed Gulen was involved, and if indeed it was a coup from outside, okay? That's the first question you have to ask in every country. Was it a coup that was being influenced from some country outside of Turkey? And if yes, what country? And then we know that the Americans were involved in coup d'etats earlier in Turkey, okay? So there is a historic record that the CIA was involved in military coup d'etats in Turkey. That's a record, that's in my book. But it's always very hard to prove. If you ask me for proof, then I can say United States has carried out a coup in Iran in 1953. They overthrew the government of Prime Minister Mossadegh. That's proven, okay? No doubt, no question, that's true. This is a successful coup. 1954, the American government overthrew President Arbenz in Guatemala. So that's a successful coup. This is proven, it happened. They also tried to overthrow Fidel Castro with the invasion of the Bay of Pigs in 1961 in Cuba. This didn't work, okay? They couldn't overthrow Fidel Castro. And now it's not clear whether groups in the United States tried to overthrow President Erdogan, okay? Maybe yes, maybe not, but we see it didn't work. So Erdogan is still in power, and so it was an attempted coup d'etat. It didn't work. But we see other examples. For instance, Chile in South America in 1973, the United States overthrew the government of Salvador Allende and installed Pinochet. Turkey, as I said, is in a very, very complicated and special position within NATO, because if you look at NATO, it's made up of 28 countries, and as I said already, the Americans are the boss. And of these 28 countries, only 2 countries are Muslim countries. One is Turkey, and the other one is Albania. All other 26 NATO countries are Christian countries. I am in Switzerland. Switzerland is not a member of NATO, and we don't want to become a member of NATO, actually. We don't like NATO very much, to be honest. But we are outside of NATO, and we look at it. And the situation for Turkey is this. NATO has started to bomb many Muslim countries. NATO has started to bomb Afghanistan in 2001. NATO countries have started to bomb Libya in 2011. NATO has started to bomb Iraq in 2003. NATO countries originally never had the idea to attack any other country. I mean, if you look at the NATO treaty, NATO was formed in 1949, so 4 years after the end of the Second World War. And at that time, the idea really was that NATO would only become active, and this is very important, only if a NATO country is attacked first, okay? Only then. So they would not do anything, and they said, we are just a defense alliance. And now, you know, it has completely changed. NATO today is a very aggressive military pact, okay? And it's the biggest military pact on the world, you know, and because you must understand that in all other NATO countries, so in the US or in Germany, people are very confused. People are very, very confused. They think Muslims are all terrorists and they have weapons of mass destruction, and therefore we have to attack Iraq, and therefore we have to bomb Afghanistan, and therefore we have to overthrow Gaddafi. We just now had a terrorist attack in Berlin in December 2016, so 1 month ago. And you know, it didn't take 12 people were killed in Berlin. And it didn't take very long when they found the passport. And they said, well, this passport shows us that it was a Muslim, a man from Tunisia. And this guy, you know, was later turned up in Italy and was shot by the police. Okay. So we don't know whether he really did it or not. He's dead. Then another terrorist attack in the United States on September 11, 2001, when this whole so-called war on terrorism started, the Americans said, oh, we found the passport of Saddam al-Suqami, again a Muslim. He was one of the terrorists in one of the plane. And now just imagine the story. They said, this is one of the guys in one plane. The plane hits the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers collapse. The plane completely destroys. And they say they found the passport. Okay. Everybody can ask himself, do you believe it? Don't you believe it? Or when you look at the terrorist attacks in Paris, Charlie Hebdo, there was a terrorist attack in Paris. I'm not sure whether people in Turkey follow this very closely, but here in Switzerland it was big news. So there was an attack on Charlie Hebdo, which was a newspaper, a satirical magazine. A few people were killed, were journalists. They just shot them. It's very easy to shoot journalists. I mean, journalists don't have guns, so and then they run away with a car. And then they change the car, okay? They leave their car and they take another car. All this is in Paris in January 2016. And so, again, they drop their passport. They forget their passport. It's very strange, okay? Terrorist attack in Berlin 1 month ago, he forgets his passport. Terrorist attack in Paris, Charlie Hebdo, he forgets his passport. There was another terrorist attack, in fact, in Paris, in France. This was the Bataclan attack, more than 100 people killed. Again, a passport was found. It's very strange, but what I wanted to explain is that people in NATO countries believe, and I'm very sorry to say this, that Muslims are terrorists. And I always tell everybody here in the Christian countries that this is nonsense. There's 1.5 billion Muslims. And of course they're not all terrorists. Are you crazy? There are some terrorist Muslims, yes. There are some terrorist Christians, yes. There are some terrorist Jews, yes. There are some terrorist Hindus, yes. There are even some terrorist atheists, yes. So the problem is violence, but they confuse it with religion. And so Turkey is in a very, very special situation because it's in the middle of all of this, in the middle. The Pentagon, if you ask them, will always say no. No, we don't do any terrorism. We would never, we would never carry out a terrorist attack in Turkey. We would never, ever carry out a terrorist attack in Italy. So when we look very closely at the terrorist attacks, for instance, we have one terrorist attack in Italy from the year 1972. Is a long time ago, I know. More than 40 years. But in that year, there was a terrorist attack in Peteano, in Italy. It was a bomb in a car, and when the police came and opened the car exploded, and the policemen were killed. Now, Vincenzo Vinciguerra later explained that there is a secret part in NATO, okay, Gladio, and he said this secret part of NATO is carrying out terrorist attacks to shock the population. It's called the strategy of tension. And in the 70s and in the 80s, nobody wanted to believe him. He said this in the 1980s. Everybody said, this guy is crazy. And a few years later, NATO had to admit that they actually had secret armies. And what I mean with this is that sometimes it takes a long, long time to find out what the truth is behind all these terrorist attacks. But you're a journalist, and I'm a historian. Look at Pentagon terrorism in general as a possibility. Because usually it's just said, no, all these terrorists, they are, first of all, private. Okay, they're not state, they're private. And secondly, they're always Muslims. So this is the story that is always pushed in our head. In 1985, the French Secret Service, DGSE, Direction Générale Sécurité Extérieure, carried out a terrorist attack in New Zealand. The French at that time wanted to carry out nuclear testing. The French obviously are a NATO country, and they have nuclear bombs. In the Pacific, they said, yeah, there's a few islands there, we want to test them. Nobody's living there. Okay, it's not true. Some people live there. Then the Greenpeace, it's an international environmental organization. They went there with their ship, a ship called Rainbow Warrior, just where the French wanted to blow up their atomic bombs. So Paris, the government, François Mitterrand, who was the president then, was very angry. He said, you know, this stupid Greenpeace is driving there where we want to carry out our nuclear tests. So somebody should do something about it. And then the French Secret Service sent the Secret Service to New Zealand, and they put a bomb on the ship, and the ship exploded and sank. One photographer who was on the ship was killed. The ship was in the harbor. And, you know, it took some time, but now today we know that this is what happened. It's state terrorism. And state terrorism continues.